Alright guys, to start off our reading block, we're going to talk about figurative language. Now we've been reviewing figurative language a little bit this week, but let's go ahead and take a look at the main three pieces of figurative language we've been talking about. Remember, figurative language is when you describe something by making a comparison to something else. Okay? When we're reading, we often come across sentences or phrases or even pictures that help create mental pictures in our own head. This is when figurative language is working at its best. And the three types of figurative language we're going to look at are similes, metaphors, and personification. So here on the first slide, this slide right here, we're looking at the example of similes. Okay? In my example, of course, dealing with basketball, that basketball player is like a superstar. This is a term often given to really good basketball players or given to anyone that's really good at something. So, is a basketball player an actual big giant star? No. But we are comparing them to a star because they're bright and people like looking at them. And it's just a way of saying someone's really good at something. So a simile is when two things are compared using the words like and as. Those are our key words. Let's go ahead and circle those. Like and as. When we're comparing two things with figurative language and we have one of those words, like or as, it is a simile. Next, we're going to look at metaphors. Okay, metaphors. In my example up here with the picture, pretty crazy picture here, is you are what you eat. Now, metaphors are a comparison in which one thing is said to be something else. So in this case, with you are what you eat, it is saying that a person that ate all these fruits and vegetables became nothing but a man of fruit and vegetables. Well, we know that wouldn't be the case. You can't really become what you eat. Just because you eat an apple doesn't mean you become an apple. Just because you eat a bunch of cheeseburgers doesn't mean you become a bunch of cheeseburgers. So metaphors are making a comparison where one thing, so in this case a person, is going to become something else, which is just a crazy mix of fruits and vegetables. So those are metaphors. They're a lot like similes, except you'll notice it doesn't use the words like or as. So this is a metaphor. This next slide is about personification, and that is when we give human characteristics to animals or objects. So let's look at our example. My computer is working so poorly that it must be sick. Well, here we see a picture of a computer, and it does look sick. But can computers really get sick? Now, I know sometimes they don't work as well as we would like them to, just like we don't necessarily work very well when we're feeling ill with the cold or the flu. So, we are giving human traits to a computer, a piece of technology that's not living. We're giving it human traits, saying that it's sick because it's not working very well. So that is an example of personification.
Hey guys, so we've been working with figurative language this week. And it's all well and good to find those examples and stories that we read. I mean, this is the reading block, that's what we're supposed to be about, right? But I thought it'd maybe be fun to see if we could find examples around our house. Or maybe if you're working in the computer lab, you can find examples in the school. Let me show you what I'm talking about.
Coming to you live from Mr. Kirchhoff's living room here, and as you can see, the Kirchhoff family Christmas tree is still up. Yes, go ahead and make fun of us. We are a little late getting the Christmas decorations down this year. But in the meantime, it makes for great examples of figurative language. For example, we could say that this Christmas tree is as bright as the biggest campfire. Now, even though we have some lovely lights on this tree and it is shining bright here in this living room, that doesn't mean that it's on fire. But we are comparing it to the biggest and brightest campfire. Imagine being at a summer camp and it's late at night and you have that big campfire just roaring in the woods. It creates a lot of light. And so this is an example of a simile because we use the word as. And we are using a simile when we're comparing two things, and we use the words as or like. So, the tree is as bright as the biggest campfire. We could also use this tree as an example of personification by saying,
Have you ever seen a tree with such a merry grin? Now, personification involves giving human traits and human characteristics to things that are not living. Well, now we can clearly see that this Christmas tree is not alive, so it can't really be merry. It can't really be cheerful or happy. But yet, with all the decorations and lights and how it makes us feel during the holiday seasons, we can say that this tree is very merry. So that is an example of personification. So while we're in the holiday spirit, we can go ahead and swing over here to the couch, and we'll see a lovely Christmas quilt that was made by Mrs. K. And looking at this quilt on our couch gives me a feeling that it looks like something else. We could say Mrs. K's quilt is a flower garden on our couch. Now we're using a metaphor. Now that is a metaphor because we're making a comparison where one thing becomes something else. Now this is a quilt. It is not a flower garden. But the bright colors and how pretty it is reminds me of a flower garden, okay, as it sits on this brown couch. Okay, so that's an example of, again, a metaphor. Once I started this journey of finding examples of figurative language around the house, I couldn't stop. I mean, I'm seeing examples of similes and metaphors and personification everywhere. Everywhere I look, I'm seeing these examples of figurative language. I'm like the kid from Math Curse or Science Verse, except I'm not seeing math problems and science experiments everywhere. I'm seeing examples of figurative language. Wait a second. Was that another example of figurative language? Mr. K is like the main character from Math Curse or Science Verse? That's another simile, because I used as. I compared two things using the word as. It's going to be a long day. Anyway, let me show you what I found. So here's another one of the many examples that I've been finding around my house of figurative language. This is Mr. Kirchhoff's blue blanket. No, it's not a blankie, it's a blanket. And it is a must-have every night for me to go to sleep. Okay? So, looking at this, I can make a really good comparison with my blanket, saying Mr. K's blanket is soft like a fluffy marshmallow because I lay my head on it or I cover up in it, and it's soft like a fluffy marshmallow. So I'm making the comparison that my blanket is like being the key word, which makes it a simile. So, Mr. K's blanket is soft like a fluffy marshmallow, and that is a simile. Now, continuing to look at the blanket, I can come up with another example. This time, thinking about metaphors. And we can say, happiness is sleeping with my blue blanket. Which for me is true. I find I am happy when I'm able to sleep with my blue blanket. I'm more comfortable. And that is making a comparison between my happiness, saying my happiness is sleeping with my blue blanket. Even though my happiness is not something that I can touch or look at or point to. But in this case, I'm comparing it to my blue blanket, and that makes it a metaphor. Whoop, I hear something buzzing. Look over here, Mr. K's cell phone, and look at all those sports updates. I mean, it looks like, or it sounds like, my phone is screaming at me to pick it up. Well, this would be an example of personification. No, my phone's not really screaming at me, unless I have some type of ringtone where it's actually a person screaming, but that would be annoying. So, my phone is screaming at me to pick it up is an example of personification because I'm giving human characteristics to something that is not living. Even though our cell phones are really impressive these days and can do a lot of things, this is not a living organism. So, therefore, personification. Continue to look for examples around your house for figurative language. We're looking for similes, metaphors, and personification. Okay, so now it's up to you. Go on the hunt and see if you can find examples of both similes, metaphors, and personification. So you've got the figurative language curse. And then I want you to take those examples and make sure you bring them
bring them with you for our live discussion on Saturday at 4 p.m. Now remember, if you can't join the live discussion, that's okay. Just remember to join the discussion at some point and post a few things about what you found. All right, keep working.